Listener advisory. This is just a stupid podcast we're doing for shits and giggles. So we apologize to any of you poor bastards that have to be subjected to, well, you know, all of this. If you stick around long enough, I'm sure you'll see what I mean. If you find dark humor discussing awful shit with a bit of levity distasteful, well, how do you exist? Seriously, you must have a secret and I don't even want it. But really, this podcast will not be for you. And you'd probably be better off listening to any of the more somber-toned true crime podcasts that are available. For those of you still listening, you sick and twisted fucks, welcome to the worst. If we did this right, hopefully you won't like yourself by the end, but you'll laugh. Hello and welcome to The Worst, the podcast of everything that is the worst. I'm your host, Mark, and sitting next to me is my lovely and talented wife and co-host, Gina, who always makes a face when I call her lovely and talented. And together we are Mental Illness Theater.
That's true.
Oh, you're going to find that out on this one. How are you doing on this very fine evening?
Pretty good, actually.
Oh, yeah, we just did a shit ton of edibles because...
You know.
We know what we do. We know it's better to be heavily medicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to hear a story?
I do want to hear a story.
Well, this is going to be... definitely our longest story. There's a lot to go through with this one. We've warned about this series since the day we began this podcast, and I will apologize in advance because this will definitely be our longest series.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Jesus Christ, I've got 2 parts written up. They're some of our longest episodes, and I'm barely even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so get ready. We are finally broaching the subject of the 2020 Nova Scotia Massacres. And I don't know what the nomenclature is now used for what happened here, but I call them the massacres because really there are multiple different distinct massacres that happen. You could actually kind of say there are 4, I would say.
Yeah.
2 distinct in Portapeak. You have all the murders, and then when he goes into Cobequid Court, specifically looking for people.
Yep.
And then you have the Wentworth, Hunter Road.
Yep.
And then pretty much everything after that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I would even say that some of those could be considered separate.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I mean, it can be subdivided a lot of different ways.
It's fucking fucked.
Well, in very short, it's a 13-hour massacre that leaves 22 people dead. And
traverses over 200 kilometers.
So when you get into how you want to subdivide it, there are lots of ways. There are lots of ways you can do that if you want to. But because of the scope...
Exactly.
I mean, this is multiple massacres.
The scope, the time between, the distance between, the fucking... delineation between certain victimology and his connection with certain victims versus his lack of connection with others, it's separate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And all of these things are things we will not be able to get to in this part because
No.
this... Oh.
Nope.
This is
We're not even going to touch this stuff, so...
Part 1 is the very quick outline of what happened, the very quick outline of... I'm saying his name because right from the start, we say names. I mean, that's just it.
Yeah, we're not pussyfooting around that bullshit. That's so fucking lame.
Yeah, we do the very quick bio of the shooter, who is Gabriel Wortman. We do, by the facts that we can put together of what happened the beginning night of this massacre, which is April 18th, 2020.
Yep.
And we take it to the end of that night. And that's all part 1. And I'm just trying to tell you how big this is going to be. We might be rolling into the summer doing this. So I apologize so much, but you knew it was coming at some point.
Oh, yeah, this had to happen.
It had to. It just had to.
I mean, this wasn't what got me into true crime by any fucking stretch, but this is...
Well, I had this set up for some point. And let's do it early. From a personal level, I will admit... before this happened, I was never a fan of the RCMP, but I was an apologist of they have a tough job and they do the best they can. Sometimes shit happens.
Right.
This was the event that made me say, fuck the RCMP.
Yeah, that's fair.
They are not a legitimate police force anymore, and I do not feel safe as them being a police force.
Yep.
And I'm just saying that from a personal level right now, this is the event that did it.
I could see that because, yeah, this really...
To me,
This took all of the incompetence, all of the bureaucracy, all of the fucking absolute ridiculous ways in which they have made themselves incompetent and put it on display. Blatantly on display.
This is the event to me that delegitimized the RCMP as a police force.
Yes.
So let's get into it. On the evening of April 18th, 2020, 51-year-old Gabe Wortman began what became the single worst rampage in Canadian history. During a 13-hour period that stretched into the next morning and covered how far? I actually didn't have that.
Over 200 kilometers.
Over 200 kilometers, which is about 120 miles. Wortman would kill a total of 22 people in multiple locations over Nova Scotia.
Or 23, depending on how you feel about fetuses.
One of the victims is pregnant.
Yeah.
You know how I feel about children in general, so... But fair enough. I mean, not everyone shares our view, so we should put that out there.
Yeah, I personally counted as 23 because that was a very wanted, very much planned baby. They were married. This was going to be their second child. This was not, you know.
I don't consider children people until they're about 7. So.
No, I agree because they're not really. They're basically piles of mush, but...
The best way to view this, like we mentioned too, is as separate massacres. Because, as we'll see, it begins in the very small village of Portapique. The next morning, it continues in a place, an area of Nova Scotia known as the Wentworth Valley. And then it continues from the Wentworth Valley basically south towards Truro. Unfortunately, we're going to have to talk about Nova Scotian geography during this episode. So, you know, there's that too. But it's worth knowing because there is...
To be fair, it goes past Truro, past... all the way to Enfield, which is, you know,
that is true, yeah, because he gets past
almost
Truro,
to the airport.
which is quite amazing. And we get into that in part 2, where there's no way in hell this man should have been able to get past Truro.
Fucking throw up some roadblocks.
A big thing to know right from the start is that Truro lies in the middle of Nova Scotia, basically a choke point.
It is the hub.
It is, and we're going to get into it, but yeah, it's the hub city, and there's no way he should have been able to get past it. The initial massacre, which occurred in the tiny village of Portapique, Nova Scotia, lasted just a matter of minutes. Dressed as an RCMP officer and driving a replica RCMP cruiser, Wortman went around the small community and basically executed 13 people and left several buildings ablaze in about 35, maybe 45 minutes. We're going to find out, too, the timings are incredibly important in this case, and a lot of them are murky.
Very murky.
Very murky.
Because apparently not one single fucking clock in Nova Scotia works.
We get a lot of surveillance tapes where it's like, well, it says this time that can't be possible. Oh, this runs like an hour and 25 minutes slow. Fucking why? Fucking why? You're in Nova Scotia.
That's why.
You're in the home of the trailer park boys. Do you expect anything to work properly? And it's worth noting that where this is a very rural area of Nova Scotia. And we're going to get into the structure of the RCMP in Nova Scotia and all that. But to be completely fair, it's worth saying that because of the speed of this first massacre and how fast it happens, nobody stops it. There's no way the police could have stopped this first massacre.
Because even Truro police...
It's going to take a bit.
Yeah, like even... See, I have a little bit of an issue with it simply because had that first call gone to the Truro police, maybe.
Which call?
The very first call from Blair.
Okay.
Was it Blair or Macaulay? Either one. One of those calls. I think it's Blair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that goes to Truro, doesn't it?
But for some reason, the RCMP handle everything and Truro handles nothing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they do make a 911 call. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But I mean, all right, a better way to put it. There's no way the police are stopping the majority. Even if they go as fast as they can.
25 minutes away, even at top fucking speed from the first call.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, to be completely fair.
Oh, yeah, no.
that first massacre is nearly impossible to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason I say this is because, like I've mentioned, we are going to spend a lot of time criticizing the RCMP and the response to the massacre, or to be more accurate, what seemed to be their complete lack of response throughout the next 13 hours.
Yeah.
That's right, Wortman was able to get out of Portapique, although the RCMP had already arrived on the scene. And what happened next was just baffling. For the next half day, it's just, what the fuck is going on?
Pretty much.
Yeah. And then I find this baffling, too. Instead of continuing his rampage like most people would, you know, if someone just slaughters most of a village and gets away, you tend to go to the next village. And
yeah, you go to your next destination and continue your slaughtering, right?
Until you're stopped.
Yeah.
This happens. Well, Wortman did the complete opposite. And we're going to find out, if you believe all the stories, he did the complete opposite a couple of times. Because he went to a nearby community and spent the night parked in an industrial park.
Yeah, behind his buddy's shop.
Just hanging out at the welding shop.
Close to the Diefenbunker.
Because no one was chasing him.
Exactly.
For reasons the RCMP has never explained.
A little nap. Well, it wasn't like minus 25 that night, too. It was bitterly cold.
It wasn't. It was only about freezing.
Really? I remember it being super cold.
No, it hovered around freezing, but still, that's enough that you don't want to be outside. And we're going to talk about that, too. But, you know, it's cold enough.
We were also on the water.
Yeah, right. And, yeah, the next morning, Wortman went back to his slaughtering because no one was chasing him.
Yeah.
After letting Wortman get away and camp out for the night, the RCMP's response didn't get any better the next day. In fact, I'd say it got worse to the point that in many ways, they became an obstruction to stopping Wortman.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Because for the next half a day, the RCMP never succeeded in getting in front of Wortman. They specifically refused to accept help from other police departments that offered their services, but were non-RCMP, which we're going to get into. They refused to air an emergency alert to the people of Nova Scotia to inform them what was going on. And in fact, the little communication they did that night and the next day, exclusively on Twitter and Facebook.
And really just Twitter.
I refuse to call it that. The only dead naming, that's fine.
Yeah.
We call it Twitter.
Yeah. I'm not calling it whatever its new name is.
Twitter can identify as whatever it wants, and I will not respect it.
Exactly.
Oh, Jesus Christ. And despite this limited information they were giving out on very few channels, they still managed to air false information multiple times.
Yes, they sure did.
There were also no helicopters put in the air because Nova Scotia is a rural place without many highways.
But they sure as fuck lied and said there were.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll find out there were almost no roadblocks set up at any time, except for towards the very end of this, where they set up a roadblock in the wrong direction. Wortman was moving south and had been moving south for quite a while, and they set up a roadblock in the northbound lane of a major highway.
Well, yeah.
A split highway, too, so it's not like...
We're smart.
Yeah, like, literally, you could say the wrong highway.
SMRT.
And this all allowed Wortman to murder a further 9 people on the morning of April 19th, 2020, or 10 if you count the unborn baby.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, he was cornered in a gas station just kilometers or miles from Nova Scotia's largest city, and by all accounts, he was executed with little to no attempt to actually capture him. We're going to find out that's extremely weird for Canadian police.
Basically unheard of.
Historically, they go out of their way, and we have recent examples of where they've gone out of their way and really put their lives in danger.
Oh, yeah, in mass killing situations.
Yep.
Dangerous to them.
We had the one in Moncton, and I think it's 2014 or 17, where a shooter was specifically targeting RCMP, or, yeah, it would be RCMP officers, and they got him alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's Parliament Hill not long ago, where there was the crazed gunman, where the dude talked him down.
And there was the Toronto van guy who was actively trying to get that police... He was goading that police officer trying
to suicide
by cop. And they got him alive.
But, you know,
But this one, after specifically issuing an order to take him alive, they just lit him up.
Sitting in his car at a gas station.
Yeah, and it wasn't the car he had started his rampage in, so they are fucking lucky they guessed right.
Well, we're going to find out in the very end. Pretty much the only reason he stopped is because his last victim didn't have gas in her car.
I love that.
Yeah. So,
that was her habit, too.
Mm-hmm. So, what the fuck happened? Well, 4 years later, we're still asking that. Funny thing is, not many people are still asking that.
And so many should be. An entire province should be.
Greetings, mental illness theater fans. Looking for more spine-chilling tales of true crime to thrill you?
Then step aboard the murder coaster.
I'm Krista.
And I'm Matthew.
And every week we bring you hour-plus deep dives into history's most bizarre and brutal crime stories.
So strap in.
Keep your hands and feet inside the ride.
And take a trip on
the Murder Coaster.
Murder Coaster Podcast. Available everywhere you listen to podcasts.
You know what? Let me change that. A lot of people are asking that. But no one in the press or with any voice you know what I mean?
Yeah,
is
that's fair.
asking that.
That's fair, because a lot of people, a lot of individuals, a lot of family, a lot of people related to it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
A lot of just citizens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Many questions, but nobody in any fucking space to actively do anything,
Push
whether that
anything.
be journalism or politics. Or even the RCMP itself, as if they would ever fucking,
So that's why we're here, doing our shitty little podcast, and what's probably going to be a 5 to 8 part series on this motherfucking massive massacres.
Yep.
So,
the abject failure to do even the most basic level of police work, because I'm fucking sorry. What the actual fuck?
Oh no, and I've said this to you while I was doing this, and I will say it from the start. I really believe if the police would have said, "We're out, you're on your own," it would have been better for the people of Nova Scotia, because the vast majority of people trusted the RCMP to do their job, and they waited for word from the RCMP, and because there wasn't any, they thought it was safe.
And Nova Scotia has historically been so safe that they have no experience in something like this. And I'm not talking about the RCMP. They can fuck themselves.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the citizens. They have never had anything like this happen.
Yeah.
And on such a scale, on such a distant scale, of course everyone was caught off guard and unprepared.
Exactly.
And trusted who they've always gone to, who has... You know, historically, Nova Scotia has had decent luck with the RCMP.
Yeah, overall, yeah. The biggest problems Nova Scotia has had is with Halifax PD, mostly. Yeah. And that's not RCMP.
Exactly. Yeah. So people did trust them. And
people
a lot
waited.
Of people in the province, the RCMP is one of the more coveted jobs because of the pension and the benefits. And in a poor province, that is...
massively respected.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. People waited for the RCMP to say something, to respond, to make them safe, because that's what you learn in Nova Scotia. Yeah. And the RCMP absolutely failed, and would have been better just saying, we're getting out of the way and this is a you problem. Because at least people wouldn't have been...
This is what he looks like. This is what he's driving. And I mean...
honestly, not even. killer on the loose, you're on your own, at least people wouldn't have been leaving their houses. Because like you said, people in Nova Scotia are so not used to that.
Exactly.
They would have buckled down, locked the doors, and been extremely suspicious of any police or anything pulling into their fucking driveways. Anybody.
And most of the rural people have guns.
Exactly. But instead, people thought the RCMP had this covered because that's what they implied.
Yeah, we thought they were doing a professional job. Some sort of professionalism was being deployed. Whether that be roadblocks or what. But, you know.
And that's why I'm saying.
Actual resources, not sitting around. I don't even fucking know half the day what they were doing.
But that's why I'm saying right from the start, the people of Nova Scotia would have been safer if the police just said, killer on the loose, we're getting out of the way. It's up to you.
Yeah, keep your family safe.
Keep your Absolutely. To begin, we have to go against the usual narrative by covering the perpetrator first, at least in broad strokes. Because as we mentioned, most news outlets in Canada won't even name Wortman. They just call him the shooter. They refer to him as GB. They don't use his name.
Yeah.
And like you said, we don't dance around shit.
No. Gabe Wortman. Denturist.
If you want to know what happened, you have to know who did it.
If you want to see the Trailer Park Boys version of him, it's Sam Losco.
Just expand on that a little bit.
That's my conspiracy theory. That Sam Losco is based on Gabe Wortman, and it was before the massacre.
Oh, well before.
Yeah, before.
Yeah.
But he was a known figure in Dartmouth.
This is Wortman.
Yeah.
Yes, because we're going to find out he's a denturist who had the creepiest fucking... His sign for his denture shop in downtown Portland Street, wasn't it? In Dartmouth.
Yeah.
Just had the biggest, scariest, grinning set of disembodied fucking teeth.
Yeah.
Hanging over the sidewalk, too, kind of. Like,
Yeah, because they jutted out of that roof.
it was fucking just weird.
Unpleasant.
But yeah, that's your... If you know the Trailer Park Boys, it is basically set where we're talking about. And it was shot in that area. A lot of the guys were from Dartmouth. And
Wortman has a big reputation.
He's well known.
Yep.
He's well known pretty much wherever he was for good and bad reasons. Honestly, like some people were huge on... He gave dentures to people who couldn't afford them.
Exactly.
But he also did a lot of sketch shit, so...
Yeah.
there's always that, too.
You talking about smuggling?
I mean, Hitler loved his dog, too.
That's like, just it, shit. Like... Wortman loved that bear.
Right? Yes. All right. So, we're obviously going to name him as...
Gabriel Wortman.
And to start off, we're going to go in broad strokes to just kind of get a feel for him. And then we're going to fill in basically the sketchy parts of his life as we go.
Perfect.
So Gabe Wortman was born on July 5th, 1968. So, oh my God, that's a cancer.
I mean...
And he was born, he's a hometown boy, honey.
I know.
He's born in Moncton, New Brunswick.
He used to live in Riverview, where I used to live.
Yes, he did, and we're going to get to that later. But Riverview is basically... Moncton, we've mentioned, is a bilingual city. It's French and English, about 2/3 English, 1/3 French. Riverview is the very English suburb of Moncton, and Dieppe is the extremely French suburb of Moncton. So... He's born in Moncton, and he's born to his mother Evelyn and father Paul. We don't know much about Evelyn, but it's worth noting that Paul was a huge fan of motorcycles and motorized trinkets, basically, because I'm not into that, so that's why I call him. I'm sorry if that's offensive, but, you know, you could say I'm into music trinkets, and I wouldn't get that offended.
Right.
Yeah, so he's into that, and that definitely took with Wortman, too. He's into anything motorized. Exactly. And Paul was also a huge, for lack of a better term, police groupie. He's just one of those hanger-ons who wants to be around police and emulate the police and police paraphernalia and all that fucking shit. Wortman also took this from his father. We're going to talk about the relationship later because that's where some of the sketchiness comes in. But it's also worth noting the policing actually ran in the Wortman family because two of Paul's brothers became members of the RCMP. So these guys all have strong ties to the force, the RCMP.
Obviously.
And like you're mentioning, that's a pretty big thing. Like, when we get into the structure of the RCMP, we're going to find out that when you become an officer, you take an oath to the RCMP.
Yeah, you do.
Not the country.
No.
Not the people you serve.
No.
Not the community you serve.
No. The RCMP.
First and foremost.
Yeah. Duh.
So there's that.
Lie until you die, honey.
But Paul Wortman went another way and was into some shady shit, which we're going to talk about. Most of his is more unspecified, but he looked like the kind of grubby dude who just got into everything that was gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paul was also abusive to Wortman, although the levels of abuse, whether this was focused on just Wortman or to the entire family, this is just murk.
Mm-hmm.
But judging from what we know about the relationship later, I would guess Paul was abusive.
Yeah.
As adults on vacation, multiple times they get into fistfights.
Yeah. That to me doesn't scream healthy relationship. You know what I've never done on vacation as an
fight
adult?
with a family member.
Yeah. No.
Same, honestly.
Yeah.
I had my troubles with Dad, but we never went to blows at any point.
Yeah, exactly.
Right in the middle of a wedding.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Happiest day, huh? Watch this.
Aha.
Ah. For the most part, we don't really know very much about Wortman's early life. We know the Wortmans moved around a lot in the U.S. during the 70s.
Yeah.
Which I've no real reasons given, but they're just bouncing around the States. And interestingly, Evelyn and Paul would have another son during their time in America, but they would put this son up for adoption. Wortman knew nothing about this until he was about 40 years old.
Because he was so young that he didn't know pregnancy,
Absolutely.
You know?
But I mean,
I feel like that's important to clarify. It's not like he was 10 and watched his mother get pregnant.
Yes, no, I totally, yeah. And then at some unspecified point, the Wortman family, as you mentioned, landed back in Moncton at the suburb of Riverview, which is the English suburb.
Not far from where I lived when I was, from 0 to 5.
Yeah. Wortman was described as a weird kid who had no sense of personal space. And at least once at an early age, he showed violence towards animals.
Yeah.
Wortman's mother later said that around the age of 10, Wortman just told her excitedly one day that he had just, quote, torn apart a bat. Which, I mean, it's the only story we have, but I didn't tear apart a bat at age 10.
I didn't tear apart a bat ever.
The worst I've ever done is June bug badminton. Which is, if you know what June bugs are, they're attracted to light. They're terrible little fucking flying critters that will stick to you and really get in your hair, too.
Yeah, horrifying.
They're terrible, and they're good sized. I mean, they're bigger than a quarter.
Yeah, they're like the size of an apricot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they're chunky.
So I used to... I like that apricot. They're a little flying apricot that sticks to you, and if they get in your hair, they fucking panic, and they get so much worse.
Yeah, and they're noisy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they're just ugly, too. Let's be honest. Looks matter. So, yeah, I used to turn on the floodlights at the front lawn, like the front driveway of my house, and wait for them to come and use a badminton racket to hit them. I don't know if that's animal abuse.
It's insect abuse, but...
I lived in a small town and smoked a lot of weed. I had to make my own entertainment.
Right?
Yeah, you get it. I had a pet raccoon, basically, so, there's that part.
I had pet foxes, basically, so under roof.
I petted the raccoon.
I petted the foxes.
That's pretty fucking cool. God, we're Canadian. Yeah, there was a Wolverine in my backyard. I was like, oh, you're cute.
I'm gonna pet you.
Well, he was young, so he couldn't kill me at first, and then as he got older, he liked me, and yeah, it's fine.
Well, I fed them, and I gave them toys, and they learned that they really liked my dog's squeaky newspaper toy.
Just don't look him in the eye and don't blink.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wortman graduated from high school in 1986 with his yearbook saying he aspired to be a police officer, which, swing and a miss.
Yeah.
I would venture to say you ended up being the opposite of a decent police officer.
Denturist is the farthest thing from a police officer.
A mass murdering denturist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Swing and a miss. I was supposed to be a teacher, so here we fucking are, right?
Yeah.
And not long after graduating, he enrolled at the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton.
Good old UNB.
We'll get back to his time in university later, because this is where a lot of his sketchiness really starts. But for now, there's one incident that I found indicative of who Wortman was as a person. While living on residence, Wortman was awarded the Chuck Cosby Award, a facetious award given to the biggest asshole who lived in the dorm.
Yeah.
He was described by his dorm mates as overbearing, controlling, over-the-top, arrogant, argumentative, and obnoxious. I would say I have one of those. I don't think I'm overbearing.
No.
Don't think I'm controlling.
No.
Don't think I'm over the top.
No.
Arrogant I can be a little bit.
Right?
Argumentative.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Obnoxious. I could see that a little bit too, honestly. But just
when I'm being argumentative.
I can see obnoxious and arrogant a little. Definitely heavy on the argumentative. But the whole controlling, overbearing. Nah, you do you, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, he got all of these.
Brace yourself for a journey into the darkest corners of human nature with the Mortal Musings Podcast, available wherever you get your podcast. Join host Neil and Megan each week as they travel to the chilling world of true crime and macabre stories. From French socialites with hidden secrets to chilling tales from death row, they leave no stone unturned. They also bring you the strange and intriguing stories of oddities that will leave you questioning your very reality. Each episode of the Mortal Musings Podcast is a roller coaster ride through the bizarre and unsettling. New episodes drop every Wednesday. The Mortal Musings Podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and all podcast platforms. If you crave the dark, the mysterious, and the utterly bizarre, you'll want to add the Mortal Musings Podcast to your podcast playlist. The Mortal Musings Podcast with host Neil and Megan. We take the cases seriously, but not ourselves. Available wherever you get your podcast.
You know, it's like a guy I once worked with. And this was at a hotel, basically serving banquet shit. So there were tons of people, and this guy was fucking creepy. This guy was one of the scariest people I've ever been around. There was no reason for it. And I just one time just asked every woman who worked serving banquets, what do you think of this guy? And I swear to God, out of like nearly 20 women that I asked, every one of them said, and I quote, "Oh, he's fucking creepy."
Yeah.
This was the early, like 2008. This guy's favorite musician was Elvis. And he kind of looked like him.
I wonder. Holy shit. So was he a cleaner?
He was a dishwasher. At the Westin.
When was this? What year was this?
2007, 2008.
Fuck.
Yeah.
We had a cleaner at Superstore who was creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Who was obsessed with Elvis, looked like Elvis, had gold-rimmed Elvis glasses that he wore all the time when working.
See, this guy didn't have glasses. Was he relatively tall?
Yeah.
Okay. It
Yeah.
could be, though. I mean...
And this would have been 2004 to 6.
Yeah.
So the timing could
Possibly.
work.
It's not the biggest place in the world
No.
either. So, yeah, that could be the same dude. How many fucking cleaners/dishwashers running around looking kind of the same, loving Elvis?
Right?
Being called fucking creepy by everyone who meets him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonder what he's up to now.
I'd forgotten about him because, I didn't see him very often. But yeah, you didn't want to see him very often.
That's how I'm described a lot. So back on track. So Wortman wins this I have trouble with that word. This fake award.
Yeah, facetious.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
About being the biggest asshole living on the dorm. And he took this like the gigantic fucking pansy that he was.
Well, yeah.
He complained to the university about being given the award and that the award even exists. Oh, I'm being targeted. And in response, the school terminated the award on the spot.
Yeah, how dare you make fun of this little pussy.
Now, when the hundreds of students who had voted for Wortman being the biggest prick on campus heard this, they actually had a near riot, and there was extensive...
It wasn't even a near riot. It was a riot.
Yeah, there was a lot of damage done to the dorm. Like, they fucked it up.
They fucked shit up. It was legendary. Like, as someone who went to high school in Fredericton and knew people who went to that university, it's still, like...
That's fucking hilarious, because some things become legendary.
Yeah, no, they messed shit up.
And it's kind of funny that this guy's legendary enough that he's still known in Fredericton for this.
Well, less him and more the riot.
Yeah, fair enough, but I mean, if you know the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, this asshole kind of caused the riot. And it's just a general thing. You'll know the type. Wortman was the type that he always had to get the best deal on stuff, always looking for a good deal. Even if you gave him a good deal, he's going to try to fucking chisel you.
Well, yeah.
Because it makes him hard.
Mm-hmm.
And he was also a self-styled handyman who couldn't do anything on his own. Just, his work was fucking shit, but he thought he was a god. Which I've run into those guys too. They're fun.
18.
Oh, yep. Later, Wortman received training in becoming a denturist, which is literally what it sounds like.
After trying his hand at being a mortician.
Is that after?
Yep.
Okay. I didn't have that in this part of his bio. Like
he went mortician first, and then, according to him, that's what inspired him to become a denturist, was because many of the dead were coming in missing teeth and blah, blah, blah.
Well, I mean, of course you are. We don't cover... We have, universal health care in Canada, but we don't cover outside bones.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, there. I mean, it makes sense. So, yeah, he tried to get into the mortuary services, and that didn't pan out for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then he took training to be a denturist, which, you make dentures.
Which did pan out for him.
It really did, because he ended up having 2 clinics of his own that he owned himself. One in Dartmouth, which we mentioned was on Portland Street, which is kind of, a sketchier area of downtown Dartmouth.
Very close to the biker headquarters. It's still located there.
Yes, very close.
Oh, yeah, well, spitting distance.
And with a sign with the disembodied grinning teeth that was literally a landmark you could use. I didn't know Dartmouth. And that was used as a landmark at least once when I was going to buy musical shit. I'm pretty sure it was symbols. It was used as a landmark
when I first started dating Greg way back in high school, because I didn't know what fucking way. I lived out in Hammond Plains.
And I'm sure when people in Nova Scotia heard Gabe Wortman, the first thing they thought was...
Those goddamn teeth.
Those goddamn teeth.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the city zoning, they fought to not let him put that sign up.
They were not impressed.
And he would not back down.
Wortman did back down from a lot of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, funny about that. And it really seemed like these businesses made a mint, because at the time of his death, Wortman owned real estate in Halifax, Dartmouth, and Portapique, and his estate consisted of 6 properties, 3 corporations, all valued at 2.1 million Canadian. We will find out, though, as we go along, that not all of this wealth came through legal means.
Oh, no.
But we're also going to put out... Okay, right from the start, we're going to find out there's a difference between the narrative of what happened, why it happened, blah, 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 is kind of different than what we can put together from the facts.
Yeah.
One to point out is something pointed at over and over that started this was April 2020 was the beginning of the lockdown for COVID in Nova Scotia. A couple months in. Not the beginning, but
Yeah, I think it started in March.
So, every narrative says it was economic problems caused by the COVID lockdown that started to stress out Wortman and shit. And that's why I'm pointing it out now. He had an estate worth over $2 million.
Right?
Like you just said, the lockdown had only started a month before.
Yeah. Ain't no way.
There's no way he's hurting that bad financially in a month.
No.
So, right off the start, we have problems with the narrative of why this happened and what kind of was the spark that caused it. But anyway, we'll get to more of that here in just a bit.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just properties that Wortman collected. He was also a huge fan of RCMP memorabilia, and through connections...
And motorcycles.
Yeah. And pretty much all trinkets that are motorized.
And guns.
And guns. Yeah. He liked to collect. And through connections both within and outside his family, he accumulated quite the collection of all of this, but especially police gear.
Yeah.
The most important of these for us in this part of the story were 4 replica police cruisers.
4.
4. That were very close to, like, these aren't broken down old style, like you're driving an 80s K car. We can tell.
No, these were modern.
Made to look very much
Like what's currently on the road.
And the one he uses, surprisingly in one way, but not surprisingly in another, is not the closest replica to a real RCMP cruiser because it has a push bar.
And what else does it have?
The slightly different dashes that fucking the police say, go look to see if it has this weird dash combination on the back. And if it does, it's the killer.
Mm-hmm.
Or the fact that it might have had a police radio.
I 1,000,000% believe he had a radio.
I'm going to make the case.
Yeah.
That he had a radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe he had a radio, but yeah, no, I specifically the push bar package, which is not equipped on RCMP in Nova Scotia,
Nope.
and the additional 2 dashes on each side.
Yes.
6 instead of 4, which is that to identify him and to whom?
True, but I was getting more to the funny part where the police literally
Oh,
tweet,
yeah, no,
like,
the police went full retard with some of their instructions.
Get right in there and take a look.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see it, this guy's killed like 20 people at this point.
Yeah, like...
The fuck are you saying?
Yeah.
Like, the words that just...
I think fucking not, yo.
But yes, no. You. That one is the one he uses.
Mm-hmm. Identifiable, but to whom and why?
But to the
questions that remain for your wife to this fucking day.
But to the average person, this is pretty much indistinguishable.
Oh yeah, no. You pass that on the highway, you're not gonna fucking notice.
And that also goes for the at least one complete RCMP uniform that Wortman had.
At least one.
Because that's what he's wearing for the majority.
And I would say more than one, because he also had a full surge.
A full surge.
Like the red surge?
Oh, surge, sorry. I get you.
That wasn't what he was wearing. He was wearing what they wear when they're out.
I didn't know, actually. See, my wife knows more than I do about this case. I didn't know he had, like, the rest dread, or the rest dread, the dress red uniform.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
No, I know this.
All right, 50 minutes in. Unfortunately, holy shit. Guess what page we're on? The 16-page script. We're on page 5. Now, unfortunately, we need to start this off with a quick rundown of Nova Scotian geography.
Woohoo!
So, lube up. Get your butt plug. What's hotter than Nova Scotian geography? Nova Scotia is a province on the east coast of Canada, and because it's a peninsula, the first thing to do is picture a relatively long, thin island off the coast of Canada. Kind of the north end is in, like, the east. The south end is on the west, so it's kind of on a diagonal.
Yes.
The thing connecting Nova Scotia to the rest of Canada is a little chunk of land about halfway on that island that shoots out to the west and connects Nova Scotia to New Brunswick. This is the Cobequid Pass, and, I mean, a lot of what happens is kind of in this area until Wortman gets past Truro later the next morning.
Yes.
Hours later.
Hours.
Hours. This pass is the main artery from Nova Scotia to the rest of Canada, and almost every major highway in the area runs from the northwest towards Moncton, where we are, to the southeast, Halifax, the biggest city in Nova Scotia.
Yes.
With Truro being the hub town in between. And if you look at a map, which is going to help a hell of a lot if you're really into this story, you'll see that this chunk of land, it kind of gets wider towards Moncton before narrowing way down at the border, and gets narrower towards Truro.
Yes.
And it's near this narrowing towards Truro that you find the town of Portapique. This is on the Bay of Fundy, called the Cobequid. This is on a part of the Bay of Fundy called the Cobequid Bay. So once again, if you're looking at Nova Scotia on its diagonal, it's little islands. To the right is the Atlantic Ocean. If you go behind that, go over the land, there's another little bit of water separating Nova Scotia from New Brunswick. That's the Bay of Fundy, and you might have heard of it because it has some of the highest tides in the world. It's debated if it's the highest, but practically it's the easiest place to go see extreme tides in the world, because the ones that beat it are like in fjords in Norway.
Right. Very difficult to get to and really observe, whereas you can just hang out.
I've seen the Bay of Fundy drain.
Yeah.
Because I lived in the valley, that's what's on the Nova Scotia side of the Bay of Fundy, and it's fucking amazing to watch.
Yeah.
It's also nuts just to see it with water, and then a couple hours later, it dry.
Yeah.
Like it's
that boat was floating, and now it's 30 feet down.
It's very
sitting on the bottom of the sand.
Exactly.
And there's not an ounce of water, and I can walk out 50 yards past it at least before I touch water.
So what cuts off the Bay of Fundy is that that little chunk of land that makes Nova Scotia a peninsula. That stops the Bay of Fundy, and at the very, 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 very end of the Bay of Fundy, towards the Nova Scotia side, is Portapique.
Oh, hey there. You like true crime stories, right? Yeah, I know, who doesn't? But I gotta admit, after a while, all those stories of murder and heartache, well, they tend to go straight to my hips. So that's why I, Leroy Luna, have created a podcast called Excuse Me, That's Illegal, where we'll take a hardcore look at some softcore crimes. No TED Talks on Bundy here. The letters BTK won't be coming from these lips. Unless he had a brother that used to steal library books. Suppose I'd be willing to go balls deep into that one if that were the case. Anyways, you'll hear stories such as the Mad Pooper, a female jogger who wreaked havoc in a Colorado Springs neighborhood, using one family's front yard as her own personal dumping grounds. If this kind of content sounds like it's up your alley, Excuse Me, That's Illegal is available right now on all your favorite podcatchers. So come join me. I'll be right here waiting for you.
Now, this is a very small community that's more of a vacation spot than an actual working town. During the summer, it can have upwards of 300 people there. Most of the time, for permanent residents, there's about 100.
Yeah.
And Wortman was one of the few full-time residents. Now, he also owned a total of 4 properties in Portapique. The least important to us is a double lot consisting of 20 acres at 287 Portapique Beach Road. He acquired these properties just before COVID hit in June 2019, and at the time it was about 20 acres of undergrowth and wilderness. Because we're also going to get into the geography of Portapique, but in really short, the only highway through this area is the number 2. It runs east to west. To get to Portapique, there's basically one road, which is Portapique Beach Road. You have to take, if you're going, you have to go south. You have to take a turn south to get on this road. From that road, it kind of forks out into Portapique Road and Orchard Beach Drive. They run parallel to the south, but they do not reconnect, and they both kind of come to dead ends, which we'll get into. But anyway, this is on the road that's closest to the water, which is Portapique Beach Road.
Okay.
And this one's at the very end of that. It's just wilderness at the end of that road where it comes basically to a dead end.
Yeah, so he bought the end of the road.
Exactly.
With plans to develop it in the future and subdivide it and blah, blah, blah.
Apparently he had big plans.
Oh, yeah.
But at this point, 20 acres of just wilderness. Nova Scotian coastal wilderness. At 200 Portapique Beach Road, so north of this wilderness area that he owns, but on the same road, was Wortman's cottage, which was basically his main residence. He did have a place above his clinic in Dartmouth, but he kind of bounced between the two. And at 136 Orchard Beach Drive was Wortman's warehouse, which was basically his gigantic man cave and his drinking spot. kind of the drinking spot for the entire community, but we will come back to that when we put this all together. So it's also worth noting that this highway that connects Portapique to everything else, the number 2, if you go east on it, you go towards the heart of Nova Scotia. You're going to go past a little town called Debert, and then you're going to come to Truro, once again, the hub town of Nova Scotia. You get to Truro, you can get anywhere.
Yes.
If you travel west on the number 2, you get into a remote part of Nova Scotia that is so rural. I don't know how else to put this, but as a kid, I played hockey. We traveled to every little fucking place in Nova Scotia to play hockey, like at least a game. I've been nearly fucking everywhere on mainland Nova Scotia. I've never been to this area in my life. It's that fucking rural.
Yeah, that's bad.
Like, it has one town, Parsboro, which is a tiny town of a couple thousand. And other than that, this is like...
I've been to Parsboro.
I've been there too, but I wasn't there. No, actually, I've never been to Parsboro. I've been to Economy.
Ah.
But it's another, like, this is wilderness. This is the most rural, one of the most rural spots you can find in Nova Scotia. This will come up in a bit, so, you know, I'm just making that observation for no reason. Now, Portapique...
I was looking hard at living in Parsboro for a minute.
How? Fucking why?
I was still doing dog grooming, and housing there was very, very cheap for very nice housing.
Oh, I guarantee you can get a cheap spot, but...
Oh, probably not now, but you could in, like, 2015.
I bet you comparatively.
Oh, yeah, no, comparatively, it's probably still not terrible,
But in reality, yeah, it's probably just fucking...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Considering what you're going to make living there.
I'm going to go stick my head in the oven.
Yeah. But yeah, no. At that point, you're talking like 65 to 85 for a really nice place.
So for Portapique itself, about 300 meters or yards down Portapique Beach Road, which is the only road to the 2, Orchard Beach Drive connects to it from the east. Like, it basically makes a 90-degree turn, and then it runs south. This is the parallel road that I was talking about.
Yeah.
And then off of this road, a little more towards the 2 and away from the water, which is where Portapique Beach Road runs right on the water, is another, it's a crescent. So it's called Portapique Crescent. It kind of loops off of Orchard Beach Drive, and then it just goes back to Orchard Beach Drive.
Yeah.
It's just a couple houses. And at the very end of Orchard Beach Drive is Cobequid Court, which runs perpendicular. So it just becomes a little box almost. And these are all important because these are the places where the massacre happens. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a very small neighborhood.
It really is. Now, north of this, there is another road with a couple little loop roads, which are what they exactly sound like. Like, there's one turn off and then another turn on back to the number 2, which become important later. There are no killings here, but this is basically how Wortman gets out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because this was April and during the start of the COVID lockdown, Portapique was at its winter population. So maybe 100 people, maybe a little more than that in the entire community at the time when the massacre began. And the first sign something was wrong was when locals noticed a raging fire, I'm assuming either at Wortman's warehouse at 136 Orchard Beach Road or at his cottage at 200 Portapique Beach. Orchard Beach Drive or Portapique Beach Road.
Yes.
Yes. And this would be sometime before 10 p.m. on April 18th, 2020. And to truly set the tone of this entire story, we have high fuckery right from the start of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Immediate fuckery.
How the rampage started is a matter of speculation, and the version served up by the RCMP has changed over time.
Multiple times.
Originally, it was to have started at a local party where Wortman got into a fight with his common-law partner, Lisa Banfield, another person who the media refuses to say the name of, but once again, we don't fuck around, and she's a huge part of the story.
Yeah.
And we will get back to her later, do not worry.
Oh, I'm not worried.
After this fight, it was said that Wortman left wherever this party was being held, although it was never specified, but he came back later and shot the place up. This was the first version of events.
Yes. This was the initial version.
Later, the size of this party got smaller and smaller, until the party was actually a virtual party and only consisted of Wortman, Banfield, and a couple from Maine.
Via Zoom.
If this is what happened, this couple from Maine, the only witnesses to the beginning of Canada's worst mass murder besides Banfield, have never told their story or even been named.
Yeah.
So we don't even know who these people are, what the
connection to them is.
Absolutely.
What they saw, what they heard.
A complete black hole.
Yep.
Now, the story went that Wortman had attacked his common-law spouse at their cottage on Portapique Beach Road. During this attack, he had handcuffed Lisa Banfield and set fire to the cottage, and then they both went to the warehouse on Orchard Beach Drive. Once there, Wortman put Banfield in the back of one of his replica police cars. And we'll find, like I mentioned, he's got 4, so he's got choice here. So
yeah.
He chooses one and throws her in. Next, or at some point, because this gets really murky.
It's so murky.
Wortman set fire to his warehouse, and sometime during this or before this, it couldn't have been after.
Right.
Banfield got out of her handcuffs, kicked out the back window of the replica cruiser, and fled into the woods.
Totally feasible.
She would remain hiding in the woods until 6:30 a.m. the next morning, a total of 8 hours on a night that sat around freezing on the coast of Nova Scotia, so a damp freezing. Keep that in mind. The fuckery continues as we really don't know the order of what happened next. Because, not that I'm being doubting here about that starting story, but I need some corroboration here.
Yeah.
But anyway. We can do our best to piece together what happened.
A little corroboration would be nice.
Because at some point during all this, never specified when, Wortman donned a replica RCMP uniform he had acquired and got into one of his police cruisers. I find it interesting there's no word when he changed, because if he's having basically a date with his common-law wife and another couple, I doubt he's dressed in his RCMP uniform.
Right.
But at some point during all this, he does a complete wardrobe change.
Which is a complete wardrobe change, loads up.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
All the supplies that he wants to take into the car of his choice, considering, don't forget, he has 4 of them.
And he does supply up. I didn't even think of that. That's a really good point.
Yeah, he supplies up. And throws her... He also had changes of clothes.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So he really supplied up.
Well, we're going to find out he works amazingly fast. And
the only way he doesn't work amazingly fast is if he had pre-planned this, which I'm not ruling out based on a little tour we'll discuss later.
Yes.
And had pre-packed those things.
Yes, so like he's got a go bag.
Right.
Yep, just
I've
grab
got
the
a
bag.
go bag, and I've got the shit I plan to wear initially right here.
I can just make the connection with when I go to work. So much faster when everything's just in the bag and good to go, and boom, pick it up and go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's the only way that the time.
Yes. The only way the times is that way. Then we have timelines with the actual murders.
Also, her just waltzing out of there.
We will talk about Lisa Banfield. Now we have timeline
He
problems
didn't look for her?
with the murders. And what was that?
He didn't take any time to look for her?
Apparently not.
Like, so
Absolutely zero time to go look for what was supposedly the target of
set this whole thing
and
off.
the trigger for all of this.
Yeah.
But here we are. Yeah, it's very common.
Yeah. The main target of my rage has escaped. I'm not even going to bother checking where she went.
Oh, I'm going to take it out on the community.
That's normal.
And then we have problems with the timelines of the murders. Like, we know the order of some, Others are murkier, and who came first, it can get a little difficult. Good example of this is the murders of Elizabeth Joanne Thomas, 59, and John Zoll.
Is it John? I thought it was Frank.
Fuck. I got the book right here just because of this kind of fuckery on my end. It's John.
Why do I think it's Frank?
No, it says John Zoll in the book.
That's gonna eat me alive.
These two lived at 293 Portapeak Beach Road, which is south of Wortman's cottage, but north of the wilderness 20 acres he owns. So
Right.
they're the only property.
Between him and his other property.
Yes. And the reason I think they might have been the first to be killed is because they're the only other ones killed on Portapeak Beach Road.
Yeah.
Everybody else is... they're up on Orchard Beach Drive and the Crescent, and we'll get to the court and all of that. But this is the only one, and if he set his cottage on fire first, which it really looks like he did, and then he moves to the warehouse, we're going to see this just makes sense, because this is where he gets in his police car, blah, blah, blah. It seems like these two might have been the first to target it. Anyway, all we really know is that at some point, Wortman went to their house, shot them dead, and then set fire to their home.
Yeah.
There's really... The ones he set fire to the home, he's actually a really good arsonist, apparently, too, because these places go up fast and thoroughly. So we really don't know much about what happened to the victims if their homes were set on fire, unfortunately. I don't know how to say that better. You know what I mean? Like, I wish there was a better way to say that. Next,
Which is really not.
Yeah. Next, Wortman targeted Greg and Jamie Blair, 45 and 40, who lived at 123 Orchard Beach Drive. The pair had vacation in Portapeak for years before permanently moving in 2019. There seemed to be no beef or history between Wortman and the Blairs, but they were aware of each other and obviously knew each other, because we're going to find out this is a close-knit community, and if you live there, you're going to know each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. One theory is that it was known that Greg Blair had firearms on his premises, and Wortman might have just seen him as a threat, but honestly, it sounds like a lot of people were armed in this community.
Yeah.
So
a lot of people were.
They really were, and there's also, he's petty, so there is a story about Wortman laid a propane line in his warehouse, and Greg worked basically at a natural gas place and knew his shit about propane. Wortman asked him to come look at the work, and Greg said, "This isn't going to work, man. Like, you don't really know what you're doing." He was polite about it, but like...
Yeah, but he let him know that it wasn't going to do what he wanted it to.
It's propane. You might blow yourself up.
Yeah,
I'm trying to be nice, but I don't want you to die.
Yeah.
And Wortman was like, "Nah, I'm sure it'll work," and it didn't. Now, it's also thought that might be enough to provoke. So we're going to find out. We don't know a lot for some of the victims. Like you mentioned at the very start about victimology. Some of them make sense and some don't.
And there's also something that he says about Linda Blair.
I think I have that here.
That,
because it's also strange. I think we're going to get to that here in a minute. So just hold on to that. Because it seems strange to me. The Blairs seemed to be on alert that something was happening despite being one of the first victims killed.
very much so.
We know this because Greg and Jamie had already put their children, Alexander, who was 12, and Jack, who was 10, in a back bedroom and had locked the door.
Mm-hmm.
Along with this, Jamie was actually on the phone with 911 when Wortman entered the house.
And he had already killed her husband on the porch outside.
Yes,
So
yeah,
he
that
was
was
alert enough to
unclear
have
too. I
gone
couldn't put
outside.
together, was that outside or was that inside?
Outside.
Okay, so Greg is shot outside the door, which I'm glad you knew that, because I have kind of a question mark here. I was hoping you knew.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
I fucking know.
And then, yeah, Jesus, that's terrible. Because Jamie then retreated to the bedroom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, barricaded the door and was shot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming through the door, because Wortman does not get through the door, because that's where the fucking kids are.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But she did succeed in stopping Wortman from getting through the door, where he would have obviously killed the kids. Now, one family friend, reported Wortman yelled, and I'm not sure how they... Do you know how they learned this? Was it
From the kids.
From the kids?
Mm-hmm.
Quote, "She should have died the first time." Is this the quote you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Which
feels very important.
feels very personal. Mm-hmm. Feels like you might have tried to kill this person before. Huh.
Or perhaps she was targeted for a reason before. Not necessarily by him, but by affiliates.
Wortman then moved to the living room, where he pulled 2 burning logs from a fireplace and just kind of left them on the floor.
Yeah, and considering how well he burned down the other locations and other things, including cars...
Yes.
This makes no sense, because this was the most half-hearted attempt to burn a house down ever.
You just took I think that was word for word my next paragraph. Like, you nailed it. Like, seeing how he tortured everything else he tries to set fire to,
burns to the ground. Yeah.
And the ground around it, and just, it's nothing left.
Oh, yeah. No, like...
This is very odd.
Yeah.
This is very, very odd.
It's almost like he didn't really care to kill the kids.
That's
Let's
true,
be honest.
too. Yeah, I mean, he's a big man. He is 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, if he really wanted to get through that fucking door and kill both those kids, he would have.
Yeah. He got the target.
Yeah.
That's, I think, what my wife's saying.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, Wortman didn't hang around the Blairs very long, kind of to your point that he didn't try to, really put an effort in to get through that door.
Exactly, because he could have.
That makes sense that, if he's not there long, he didn't try the hardest. I'm sure it's not the easiest to move that much weight from, you know what I mean? It's difficult, but if you're really determined, he could have got through that door.
If you're really determined, you shoot a hole through the door that you can see through, and you're shooting those kids.
Ugh. And he didn't.
Exactly.
Kids do survive.
Mm-hmm. And it can't have been that heavy because the kids got out of the house.
Yeah. Which probably means they had to pull their dead mother from in front of the door.
Yep. Don't think about it.
No. I also found it interesting, despite the fact that Jamie was apparently on the phone with 911.
And told them who it was, how he was dressed, what he was driving.
Yeah. No, I was going to say Alex and Jack, well, they had to get past their slain mother to get out of the bedroom. And they actually went to their dead father, and one of them went in his pocket to get a cell phone to call 911.
Yeah.
Now, maybe she was on a landline. You just can't take a landline with you.
Yeah, right.
Right? I'm not sure. I just found that interesting that they took the father's phone. So I'm assuming there must have been a reason. Even if it's just panic, who fucking cares, man?
I mean, honestly, depending on the condition of her body when she shot,
fuck yeah,
that
fair
phone
enough.
could have taken damage.
Yeah.
That phone could be soaked in blood.
Yeah.
So
good times. Good
yeah,
times.
it's stuff you don't really want to think about, but that's the reality of it.
Right.
Yeah. If
It's
you're
in a
on the phone
lit
and it's a
room, and I don't
headshot,
want to
man.
see that. Whereas at least Dad's out in the dark porch.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm not going to see as much. The realities of murder.
I'm sure they're doing great.
Yeah. The kids then went to a chicken coop that was on their property, and I'm pretty sure this is where they first called 911. It's hard to tell when they first call 911.
Yeah.
But anyway, eventually they go to a nearby house owned by Lisa McCauley. This is basically their neighbor. There's a path between, the wilderness.
Yeah, because they're friends with her kids.
Exactly. So they run over, and when Alex and Jack showed up at Lisa's door, it probably took her about 2 seconds to realize, holy shit, something very, very, very... I know these kids.
Something is wrong.
Something terrible has happened. So she quickly bundled up Alex, Jack, and her own children and stuffed them into the basement for safety. And then I find amazingly, because this is not me. This is where I'm not an East Coast Canadian.
No, I'm in the basement too.
So many East Coast Canadians have that someone might need help instinct, which is awesome and important. It makes you a really good person. And it makes me a terrible person for not having it. Because I'm with you. We're in the basement with the animals and the kids. We're finding weapons. We're sharpening fucking sticks. We're putting together Molotovs. Like, yeah. Just saying. But
we are in the defensive position.
But this woman, being a good person, was like, well,
yeah, with concern for her neighbors.
Maybe someone needs help.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe they're still alive.
God damn it. Now, once Lisa McCauley was outside, she decided not to use the path the kids had just used over to the Blair house, and instead she went down to the end of her driveway, which ends at Orchard Beach Drive. Now, some have speculated this was because she saw an RCMP cruiser parked there.
And she very likely did, based on certain things that I observed as this was unfolding in Facebook groups.
Yes.
Yeah.
Such as
other people seeing police outside their house and feeling safe.
Yeah. Funny about that.
Within the same neighborhood.
Yeah, because he does a couple of loops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she saw a police cruiser, and obviously thinking that's a police officer, she walked up to it to probably either ask what's going on or do you know about?
Yeah.
Or, you know, these kids just came over and she was killed by gunfire. You know, no other way to put it. And she was shot.
Yeah.
And, you know, Wortman just left her dead in front of her house at the end of her driveway.
See it.
Yeah. I'm just pointing that out for no reason either, because how long does it take the RCMP to find the children in the basement?
To get them out?
Yeah.
Oh, they're on the phone with 911 for 2 hours.
So it's about midnight. I'm just pointing out, if you find a dead body in front of a house and the kids are downstairs, and I don't understand how that takes that long. But anyway, we'll get to all that. The next people to notice that something was wrong were brothers Corey and Clinton Ellison. The two were visiting their father, who lived on Orchard Beach Road, and that night at around 10 p.m., they were sitting around listening to music. That's when one of them heard what they thought was a gunshot. When they went outside to investigate, they noticed the glow of flames to the north on Orchard Beach Drive. This was probably Wortman's warehouse, now on fire.
Yes.
Corey decided to go check out the scene, and shortly after, he called Clinton to let him know that Wortman's warehouse was on fire, and, quote, the fire's real bad. Once again, Wortman doesn't fuck around when he does arson. Or murder. This call ended, and when Clinton called him back, the call went unanswered.
Which, by the way, just as an aside,
yes,
pretty crazy for a first-time murderer that, you know, the only one who got away was his initial target.
Yeah.
Because there's no one who shot and survives.
2 people are shot at and survive.
But
no, there are no injured, really, from this. We have
one. And the 2 people who were shot at and survived weren't necessarily targeted. You know what I mean? They were come upon.
Yes.
And were in their own vehicles and able to hit the gas.
That's fair enough, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is both of them.
Yeah, that is both survivors.
Absolutely.
So.
Good point.
Just seems a little good at this.
Yeah. So Clinton, I mean, obviously he's instantly freaked out because now he can't get a hold of his brother Corey.
Yeah.
So he grabbed a flashlight and went up the road looking for his brother. Dressed for the night, too. Like, you know, he pulls some clothes on.
Yeah.
Cause
turns a jacket on, he's got warm shoes on.
It's April. It's freezing. Like, come on. Unfortunately for Clinton, he did find his brother Corey, deceased from gunfire, and left in front of the gate of Wortman's warehouse. So right at the foot of the gate.
Upon seeing this, he freaked out proper.
Yeah, I mean, no one knows exactly what happened to Corey, but we're guessing it was kind of the same thing as Lisa McCauley. He saw a police cruiser pull up and was going to ask, what's going on here? Is everything okay? You know, the fire.
Can you help?
And he got shot. And yes, as you just mentioned, Clinton, as a normal human being, He bolted.
Yeah, he freaked out proper. Mm-hmm. My brother's dead from a gunshot. I'm fucking out.
Yeah.
And he's smart enough to turn off his flashlight.
Well, the other part was, too, like, he kind of figured that, you know, Corey had been shot, and then he saw what he said was a flashlight bobbing towards him. And that's when he shut off his flashlight and bolted.
Yep.
Yeah. Clinton would spend the next 4 hours hidden in the woods until he felt it was safe to come out. And because this is April in Canada, Clinton had to be taken to a fire hall nearby in Great Village to be treated for mild hypothermia.
Yes, he did.
Mm-hmm. So he was out of the woods by about 2 a.m. for 4 hours. This is about 10.
Yeah, I'd say about 2. Even 3 if we're extra generous.
Yeah. And Lisa Banfield came out at 6:30.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Shoeless and yoga pants.
She was fine.
Oh, yeah. How's my makeup?
Now, this is where the series of events get really murky. But we'll do our best. Wortman next went to 71 Orchard Beach Drive, the home of Don and Frank Galunchin.
That's why I keep thinking Frank.
Ah.
Because there is a Frank.
Yes.
Thank you. Now I feel less crazy.
And Don is 61, Frank is 62.
Yeah.
We have few details of what happened here, except for Don and Frank were murdered in their home before Wortman thoroughly torched the place. And as we've talked about, when he torches a place, he torches a place. In this case, he also set fire to Frank's woodworking shop, which was a separate structure on the property. So he went out of his way to douse this place, because these aren't natural fires.
No.
And burn it to the ground.
And I don't even know if he's dousing, but we can get into that later.
Yes, that is a good point, too.
Yeah.
That is a really good point.
Thank you.
Yes. Wortman then got back into his fake police cruiser, turned on the headlights, and simply sat facing the road as the house behind him burned.
Yeah. Not creepy at all.
Right across the road from the Galunchins lived Bjorn Mersbach, who, fuck, dude, you take the cake for the best name in the case.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
And this dude, as soon as he saw anything going on, he was like, it's fucking Wortman. Wortman's on a warpath. He hasn't talked to the press. He's talked to some of his friends about this. But it really seems like he hated fucking Wortman, and he just knew he was a scumbag, and if something like this was going to happen, it was going to be
him.
It was going to be this guy. And when he saw a police cruiser, because we're going to find out everybody knew that Wortman had police cruisers and would just kind of drive him around. So when he saw the house burning and a police cruiser there, Bjorn knew who the fuck it was.
Oh, yeah. Immediately.
So what does he do? He packs up his family, hides them in a back room, grabs a rifle, goes outside, takes a defensive position, and just stares down the police cruiser.
Yeah.
Bring it.
Fucking balls out, man.
And
this is why, to circle back, I feel like had they... You know, they couldn't tell people at this point. They still weren't.
This is a matter of minutes.
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying they should have let people know at this point what was up, but a lot more people would have taken that fucking position.
That's what I'm saying.
Sunday morning.
That's exactly
even
what I'm
late
saying.
Saturday night, if they had given proper fucking notice of, hey, there's a fucking crazy killer out here.
That's exactly what I'm saying about the RCMP. Like, just getting out of the way and letting people... Yeah.
Even if you had just tweeted, the province is a horror movie, there's a killer on the loose.
He's somewhere, bye.
Yeah, like, fucking come on, man.
So, into the standoff.
And I would still have preferred an emergency notification versus a tweet, but...
We are going to soak it.
Oh,
There's so much to
will.
get through. Oh, my God.
There's so much, but... Just giving them, like, the easiest path out. Just tell us.
And that's when into the standoff drove up Andrew and Katie McDonald. The McDonalds lived at the junction of Porter Peak Beach Road and Orchard Beach Drive, about 300 meters from the Galunchins. That night, Katie noticed flames coming from, I'm assuming at this point, Wortman's warehouse.
Yeah.
and they went to see what was happening. Now, the McDonald's got in their car around 10:10 p.m. Once again, this is a matter of minutes we're talking about. And drove by the Galunchians. While they did, they noticed an RCMP cruiser parked in the driveway, and as they passed by, they also saw a flash from inside the house, but they didn't think much of it. Maybe someone's taking a picture.
Right.
The McDonald's drove as far as Wortman's warehouse, which was fully on fire by this point.
Oh, yeah.
Once again, a matter of minutes, this warehouse is fucking blazing.
Engulfed.
Yes, that is the word, too.
Oh, yeah, because it burnt, like, the land around it.
Almost.
Yeah.
Almost like a chemical agent was used instead of an accelerant.
Yes.
Like, phosphorus or something.
Right?
Yeah, weird. After turning around and traveling back up Orchard Beach Drive, the McDonald's once again passed the Galunchians, and as they passed, the police cruiser backed onto the road. It and the cruiser and the McDonald's car slowed down to probably talk to each other.
Yeah, right.
I just saw this on fire. I think you're a police officer. And that's when the red light of a laser sight flashed inside the McDonald's car. Andrew must have amazing fucking reflexes.
He's really goddamn lucky.
Oh, absolutely. Because in that split second, he gunned the throttle to get away and simultaneously ducked. And this saved his life and possibly Katie's as Wortman fired into the car and grazed Andrew's head.
Yeah.
But both McDonald's got away, other than that, unscathed. The McDonald's came out of Orchard Beach Drive probably like pretty quick.
Yeah.
And onto Highway 2. So they just off Orchard Beach Drive onto that little bit of Porter Peak before, it splits off. And then they're on Highway 2. This is a matter of seconds. This is not very far. At the intersection, they ran into another RCMP cruiser, which would have made me shit my fucking pants.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great, there's more.
Ah!
But in proper fucking Canadian style, this is so Canada. Andrew recognized the officer at the wheel as Constable Stuart Basselt, who he knew from playing hockey with. So, in true Canadian form, Andrew knows the cop from hockey and is like, hey, I recognize you.
Safe.
And this is when, so this has got to be before 10:15?
Yeah.
Andrew McDonald told Constable Basselt that Gabe Wortman was dressed as a police officer, driving in a police cruiser, and had just shot at him.
And didn't he move and a bullet fell out of his jacket at that point?
Oh, shit.
Further confirming.
I missed that part.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He got so lucky. So lucky.
By this point, Wortman must have known or suspected that police had been alerted to what was happening. Like we mentioned, this is rural Nova Scotia. It's going to take a while. But you have to assume he's thinking, okay, we've got people shot. People have seen me now and gotten away. There are fires which are fucking visible at night.
Exactly.
Someone must have called 911 by now. You have to assume that the initial response from the RCMP is coming.
Yeah. And it's going to take them half an hour to get here. But still, I've been at this for at least that now.
So you would think this might be the point. Okay, this guy just got away. I should make a move here.
I better hustle.
I better hustle. Well, no. Instead of traveling generally north, which is the way you're going to have to go to get out of Porter Peak, Wortman went south. Wortman went south towards Cobequid Court, which is at the very end of Orchard Beach Drive.
So as deep into the neighborhood as you can go, basically.
Yep, and comes to a dead end. You have to retrace your steps to get out now. And he did this because he had 2 more stops to make on this initial rampage. These were at the homes of Aaron Tuck and Jolene Olivers, so they lived together, as well as the Bonds, and they lived on Cobequid Court. Like we said, this is at the very south of Orchard Beach Drive. There's no way out. So instead of making a move to get away, he goes deeper into what should be a trap.
Exactly.
Yes.
This all seems very sensible.
Mm-hmm. Wortman first went to 41 Cobequid Court, the home of Jolene Oliver, Aaron Tuck, and his teenage daughter, Emily. Wortman and Aaron had a history, which we will get to later. But for now, it appears that Wortman arrived and got into the house. Depends on who you ask. In one version, there wasn't much of a struggle. Details show that Aaron had defensive wounds on his hands, which would indicate a struggle.
Yeah.
So here we are. In the end...
It sounds to me like there was a struggle, and also Aaron was a fighter.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to that, but apparently he lost this one because he ended up being shot multiple times, with one of these wounds being to the roof of his mouth. Yeah. That's personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that means he put the gun in his mouth. And
exactly.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. And Aaron's body was later found near the front door. So one version saying there's no... Yeah, I don't know, man. Sounds like there's a scrap to me.
It really sounds like there's a scrap to me.
Jolene's body...
Especially based on the rest of the placements.
Well, yeah, Jolene's body was found just behind Aaron's, about 3 feet from a sliding door which led to the living room where Emily was sitting on a couch. Jolene had been shot twice, once through the upper arm that went into her chest, and a second time from close range to the head. So one to disable and an execution.
Yeah.
Emily was found shot once on the couch in the living room. Now, this is another one, too. This is, in the timeline, the murders in Cobequid Court are always put last. Like I've kind of pointed out, he's now... Trapped. The McDonald's said they got in their car at 10:10.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like maybe they are incorrect.
True, because Emily Tuck was in constant contact with a friend that night through texting.
Her boyfriend, wasn't it?
I'm not quite sure. That's why I'm just saying a friend.
I'm pretty sure it was her boyfriend, but yeah, either way.
Any which way, and her last text was received at 10:07 p.m. So, once again, we have a lot of murk in the timelines.
Yeah.
Here. Yeah.
Because 10:07 is a solid 8 to 10 minutes earlier than the timeline that we're working with.
Exactly.
Based on what time they say they got in their car and met up with him.
Yep. So
what the fuck?
And the police say their first responders, the first people there, are 10:26.
Exactly. So
the McDonald's run into, let's say it's right as he gets there, 10:26. It's strange, isn't it?
Exactly. It doesn't add up at all.
It really doesn't.
It sounds like their clock is wrong or they're misremembering what time they got into their car.
Yeah. Also, where there are no fires set in the Cobequid Court murders here, maybe the timing's just wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe they happened before... the end. He runs into the McDonald's.
Exactly.
Like, we're not really sure, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
But anyway, what's usually said to be
they didn't happen before 10:07.
Yes.
That's all we can be sure of.
And it seems like after these murders came the murders of Joy and Peter Bond, who were 71 and 75. This is a retired couple from my hometown of Chester, Nova Scotia, who had just moved to Portapique because they loved it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because Chester's crazy expensive.
Oh, definitely expensive because, a lot of vacationing people love to live there.
It's a yachty.
It is. And then if you have the money, well, you can just live there the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's great. Unless you don't, and you don't have money and then you just move away. Once again, there are a few details about these murders, but it seems like Wortman just walked up to the Bond's front door dressed as an RCMP officer, and Joy, being a normal person, met him at the door thinking it was an officer, and that's when Gabe shot her to death pretty much at the door, and then Peter was found a few feet behind her, also shot to death. After this, Wortman got back into his fake cruiser and drove back up Orchard Beach Drive, literally retracing his route. Because once again, he does all of this so fast.
Yeah.
But instead of following it until it links up with Portapique Beach Road, which is technically the only way out from where he is, he knew a shortcut, which was a blueberry field. Just a nice flat field that you could drive a police cruiser across. So he drove across that And he linked up with one of the loop roads we mentioned, which is literally, it starts on the 2, it makes a little half loop, and it connects back to the 2. That's it. He drives through the blueberry field, he gets on this little loop road called Brown Loop Road, and then he travels east towards the heart of Nova Scotia. The timing of this escape is sketchy, but most locals who saw the police cruiser go across the blueberry, because there were people who saw the car go across the field, said it was about 10:35 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now at this
Pretty
point,
consistently.
yeah, at this point, Wortman could have gone literally anywhere he wanted, as by getting past whatever RCMP presence was at the intersection of Portapique Beach Road and Highway 2, that's where we saw McDonald run into the officer and tell him, Wortman's on the fucking loose dressed as a cop. He had just completely slipped the RCMP.
Yep.
And I mean completely.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't be able to catch up for the next 13 hours. He literally could have gone anywhere. And this is where I also say
13 hours gets you to Ontario, basically.
the RCMP got so lucky with what Wortman did next, because with this head start, like you just alluded to, he could have gone anywhere.
Yep.
He could have been anywhere. But instead, he drove east about 25 kilometers or 16 miles away to Debert. This is about a 20 to 25 minute drive. Now, one might think he's going to Debert to continue killing. Next town over. Let's keep it going.
Logical.
Yep, but to the contrary, Wortman did the complete opposite. For the next 7+ hours, Wortman basically put his killing spree on hold, and he spent the night hiding behind a welding shop at 123 Ventura Drive. This is an industrial park in Debert.
Just hanging out.
This welding shop was on the site that used to be part of the Diefenbunker. The Diefenbunker was a part of Canada's basically national, how do you even put it? National nuclear defense strategy, that if we were to be attacked, this is one of the sites that was like where we could stick officials and shit so we could keep running the country as everything died. And Wortman, for whatever reason, he was very attracted to the Diefenbunker. He thought it was fucking rocking. The reason it's called the Diefenbunker is because it was made by Prime Minister Diefenbaker. Why can't I think of his first name? Who, you know...
No idea.
Cold War Canadian Prime Minister. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Now, this welding shop was owned by Brian McDonald, and he had done work on some of Wortman's various vehicles. So Wortman knew this shop, knew the guy who owned it, knew about it. Not saying that Brian McDonald is involved in any way, pointing it out because Wortman knew where he was going.
He was familiar with this location. He was familiar with, I think, kind of a space behind it.
And a path that was hard to find that led to that space behind.
Yeah.
Once again,
That
not
you
saying...
could drive up.
Yes, not saying McDonald is involved in any way, but saying on the other end that Wortman probably clocked this at some point while getting work done. Didn't mention it, but clocked it in his head. Hey, this could be useful at some point.
Yeah, right?
Exactly.
His smuggler instinct picked up on it.
You get it. About a week later, McDonald and his daughter searched the path and, like, behind the welding shop, and they found an empty gun holster, a pair of leather RCMP dress boots, an empty box of ammunition, and a pair of knuck-knuck slippers.
Which was not revealed to the public.
Yeah, the slippers wasn't. Everything else was, but the slippers wasn't. That came out later.
Yeah.
Now, later, surveillance footage was released that showed an RCMP cruiser driving on Ventura Drive at 11:12 p.m. on April 18th, which kind of works with the timeline.
It does.
This makes sense.
Ish.
There's a couple minutes there.
There's like 17 missing minutes.
Still, though, I'm willing to let that go.
Oh, yeah. Me too. There's 17 minutes.
Yeah. Gotta stop and smoke a joint after all that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I had to pee. Like, it's 17 minutes.
Right. The same cruiser was captured on the same camera, leaving the area at 5:43 a.m. on April 19th. Because guess what? I mean, Wortman gets to restart his massacre the next morning.
Yeah, he does.
Refreshed after over 7 hours of just whatever he did that night into Bert.
Which we'll never know.
Which we will never know what he did, apparently. And that's where we'll leave off until next week. We're halfway through the massacre. We've barely gotten into the connections.
Yeah, oh yeah, we are just not even scratching the goddamn surface. Oh, God.
How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I know. There's so many things we could have elaborated more on here.
Oh, yeah.
And just made it like the longest first episode of anything ever.
But that's all stuff we'll have to get to.
That's why I'm sketching it out at first.
Yeah.
And then we fill in the blanks. Because we've mentioned, yes, Wortman is a hardcore smuggler. We're going to get into how he became a smuggler.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, how you feeling?
Excellent.
Feeling safe living in a town with the RCMP?
No.
Oh, my God, no. Interesting.
Never will again, but...
This is a very interesting case. I would ask if my wife has anything to add, but I know there's a lot to add. And we got many parts to get into it. So
Exactly. So I'm just going to hush up for now, and we'll see you in the next one.
We'll hold off on that classic question.
Yeah.
If you like that story, feel free to rate or review us or follow us, which really helps, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever app you use. It helps a whole lot. Or you can just tell people about our bullshit. Yeah. It helps too. We have merch at PS Cats at Redbubble. That stands for Paint Splatter Cats, where you can find all my wife's art because she's an accomplished artist in multiple mediums. Thank you very much. Fabric and visual.
Love you.
All our socials are linked in the show notes. We have a Patreon, and we have patrons. They are Kat Roop Wagner, Kat Roop Wagner's hilarious son, Melissa Jusek, and Nathan Lucas. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. We appreciate it more
Keeping
than
the
you
lights
ever
on.
know. Yeah, seriously. Because
Reminding us people actually listen.
we're big in South Africa and Australia.
I love that.
I find that great. We're actually really bad in Canada. No one listens to us in Canada. I am assuming we offend Canadians.
Probably.
And I see why Australians like us. They're the type call you a cunt.
Yep.
Friendly.
Oh my God, yeah.
Right? No, it's a good nature, man. Fuck.
Yeah.
So, unless my wife has anything to add.
You know I do.
Until next time, have fun and play safe.
Bye.
Bye.